One of the easiest ways to get started with PR storytelling is to just do interviews, to invite yourself or your CEO, if you're not the CEO, to be a guest speaker on a podcast, a YouTube, or a television station, or a blog, something like that. And one of the key lessons that I learned is that PR interviews are basically fake. So when you're watching an interview on the news, it looks like the person is spontaneously being thrown a bunch of questions, and then they just sort of intuitively and quickly know the answers to all those questions. But what I learned a long time ago from my brothers, because they had experience with PR before I did, they used to go on these tours where they would travel around the United States to do interviews with journalists, etc. And what they told me was that really you and the interviewer are both colluding together to create a nice video. So what they're going to do is they're going to want you to know what questions are going to be thrown at you, at least generally, maybe not the exact question, but at least the general topics. And they want you to have an answer. They don't want you to have a lot of ums and ahs. They don't want a lot of awkward silence that needs to be edited out. So you're really working together with them to produce something. It's not just off the cuff random questions. So when I started doing PR interviews, so for example, with podcasts and YouTube channels, I realized this was the case. You basically provide them with what it is you want to talk about, or they're going to tell you some of the key things, and then you work together to produce it. And often, what they will do is they'll edit out a lot of the silence or awkwardness that's in the video to make it seem like a seamless production. So these are fabricated things. These are not just natural conversations in most cases. Now, some podcasts are going to be a little more off the cuff and casual, and that's fine. There may not be a lot of editing there, but by and large, PR is going to be more fabricated. So what you can do is you can control the conversation. So you can tell the host what you want to talk about and what you don't want to talk about. So there might be key things about your company that are getting bad attention or that are deficient. Just say these are no goes for you. And perhaps if they're leading the conversation, you can ask them what topics or questions beforehand, and you can prepare for that. You can practice that before the interview happens. The other key thing is you want to have something to promote. So, for example, I was doing an interview before, and they said, is there something we can give away to the audience?" And I gave away a free product marketing plan template, a one-page template I prepared in Word. You could also give away a book, or it could be a sweepstakes where you say the first 50 people to respond get a free copy of the book, or it might be a discount or free trial, something like that. So the general theme is you don't want surprises. So when you see people getting interviewed, they might look like masters, like they don't make any mistakes, but really that's about controlling for surprises. Nobody generally likes surprises. Now, it may seem like that because of birthdays and stuff, people like surprises. In the business world, it's generally a bad thing. That's a big lesson I learned in business. So, the other key thing is you wanna make sure the host saves space. So if the host makes a mistake or they ask you a question that doesn't make sense, just go along with it, and, you don't wanna embarrass them or make things be awkward. You want things to be smooth. This is also a lesson that we learned from the book Free PR. Another key thing is you wanna repeat yourself. Don't expect people to understand what you said just because you said it once. Contrary to what you may have learned in school, redundancy is actually a good thing. Another good thing is to have notes. Just like going into an interview for a job, write down notes. Have those 7 key things you want to mention in your interview, for example. You also want to use simple language. Don't try to intimidate or confuse the interviewer or the audience. Simple language, clear language. Sometimes it's good to use certain vernacular if your audience uses that. So, for example, appealing to audiophiles or engineers, you're going to want to use certain terms that makes you seem like an insider. Another key trick is to avoid questions you can't answer. Now, I've listened to some excellent speakers. So, for example, Byron Sharp is one of the biggest thought leaders in the marketing world. I've listened to experts on global issues and global hegemony. And one thing I notice is they're very intelligent, they're very poised, but when they're thrown a question they can't answer, they don't say, "I don't know," or "I'll get back to you." What they do cleverly is they ask themselves a question and answer that instead. So they avoid answering questions they can't answer. So that's what you can do as well, and that's often what politicians will do too. Is basically do some sort of double speak or just answer the questions that they're prepared to answer. Now, another key note here from the book Free PR is that when you're doing something like television interviews, it isn't natural. It's not a natural conversation. So, one thing is there's not much space for nuance. You can't go into a lot of detail and say, well, this is true in this case and not true in that case, and here are the details. It's more what he describes as a sledgehammer. And what that means is you need to repeat yourself and you need to really focus on one clear message. Now, later in this course, we're going to talk about an article from Metadata that talks about how having a strong brand voice often means having a strong point of view on a specific topic. Because when you're in the crowd of millions of messages in the world, to stand out, often that means you need to have one clear message, and that doesn't leave a lot of room for nuance. But it also requires that you do a lot of repetition to hammer home that point. Now we're going to talk about some PR tips that come from the book Traction. And within the book Traction, which is a book focused on startup marketing, we have some advice from Ryan Holiday. So, one the piece of advice here for PR is to pitch smaller publications first, because what gets published in smaller publications is often picked up by larger publications. So, for example, if you publish something in a subreddit or in Hacker News, that might get picked up by TechCrunch. And when it's picked up by TechCrunch, then the New York Times is going to mine that to decide what they publish. So, there's kind of a pyramid here. And it's easier to get traction initially by starting small. So, some examples of the best stories, and this comes from a chat with a TechCrunch representative who gets pitched about 50 times per day. These are the kinds of stories that are most likely to be successful for you. We have here a new product launch, breaking a usage barrier. Now, a lot of these are going to be particular to the tech space, but there's certainly cases where you can modify these for non-tech startups. Raising money, PR stunt, and I just want to highlight a few that come from the book Free PR. Having SPCA puppies at a trade show booth would be a good example of a PR stunt. Another was when Canvas Pop gave away mock $50 bills at a trade show, which were not real $50 bills, but what they were $50 discounts at Canvas Pop. So a cool little thing to garner attention. A big partnership. So an example of this was when I was working in San Francisco for a Series A startup, and we landed a partnership with a much bigger company, which was Intuit, the maker of QuickBooks. A special industry event that's coming up is going to be story worthy. And another key piece of advice here is to bundle one or more or two or more of these announcements into a big pitch, because any individual thing here is not going to be as effective as combining them together. So an example here is we launched a new product and that new product breaks a usage barrier. So that's much more newsworthy than just one of these elements alone.